Welcome to the Advisors Fuel podcast, where high-performing financial planners and wealth advisors discover proven processes and actionable strategies to elevate their client experience, grow their businesses faster, and achieve unprecedented success. Here's your host, Adam Koós, founder at Adrenaline Advisor Consulting at adrenalineadvisor.com.
All right, everybody. Joining me today is somebody who's helping financial advisors work smarter, not harder. Arielle Minicozzi, the founder of Sphynx Automation, a virtual technology and automation consulting firm that helps financial advisors and other service businesses set up their tech stacks and automate their business processes. Leveraging her background as a former financial planner and RIA owner, Arielle is on a mission to empower other financial advisors to streamline their operations using low or no-code technology tools. And I honestly have no idea what that means, but she's going to tell us. But driven by her passion for automation and her unique insights into challenges faced by financial advisors, Arielle transforms her clients' practices by crafting tailored solutions that seamlessly integrate with existing systems. Her goal is to shape the future of financial planning by fostering growth and enabling financial professionals to focus on what truly matters, which is delivering exceptional service to their clients. So, Arielle, thanks so much for joining me for this third podcast on the Advisors Fuel.
Thanks, Adam, for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
That's going to be fun. So one of the things before we even get into questions that I want to just kind of say is that in the Adrenaline program, the course, we go through the importance of delegation and how one of the things I hear people ask me all the time is, how do you do all the things you're doing? You know, how do you run a wealth management firm, a financial advisor consulting firm, an exit planning firm, all while being a sub-advisor for a partner in Chicago? And the answer is, I don't do most of it. Somebody else is or something else is doing it, right? It's the whole Dan Sullivan who, not how concept. So I think, would you agree that a lot of what you're helping advisors do is essentially create employees that are not really people, but things?
Yeah, definitely. And it's not necessarily, Adam, about replacing people, but rather allowing and empowering people to do the things that humans do a lot better than machines, than technology. But frankly, there are some things that machines are just a lot better at doing than we are, which is things like data entry and copying information accurately. How many times when you've been entering somebody's information into your CRM, have you fat fingered it? Or maybe that's just me, where somebody tells you their date of birth and I'm a little dyslexic and I put one digit wrong. And not only is that problematic for, continuity reasons and compliance reasons, but it doesn't lead to the best client experience. On the other hand, though, having those conversations with your clients about their goals, about their interests, about the things that move their lives forward, the reasons why probably most of us got into this business in the first place, that's something that a computer does not, at least currently, do quite as well as a human. And so why not allow the technology to do the things that it does best, freeing up the human labor capacity to be able to do the things that humans do best?
I don't think that that'll ever happen, by the way. This is my opinion. I don't think robots will ever take over financial advice and the personal connection people need. Not so much when the market's going up, but times like now, when the market's in correction or crash territory. But I love that you shared all that about the things we miss, the fat fingering, because I didn't even think about that. I'm thinking, when I think of delegation and automation, I think about the things that that advisors and really all business owners suck at, which is this idea of trusting someone else to do it. And their biggest reason why, it's like, well, what if they make a mistake? And the answer is they're gonna make a mistake. We have this thing on our fridge at the office that says there are no mistakes, only lessons. Because let's be honest, we've all made mistakes. So whoever you delegate to or whatever you delegate to, the who's are probably going to make mistakes and you have to let them go. But the what's, these automations, I feel like that's kind of a cheat code. But let's back up for a second and talk about your story.
Sure.
I know you've had a unique journey. I'm not going to give it away here and steal your fire. But tell us about your automation from where you started to starting Sphynx Automation, kind of how you made the leap into the world of automation.
Yeah. So back in 2017, I started my RIA. It was quite a journey to even get to that point, but I'll fast forward to that day. And in the interim of trying to go out and get financial planning clients and doing all the things, marketing, speaking, all the things to attract business, which I really wasn't comfortable with, as I think many people start a business and realize like, oh wait, I actually have to sell. I actually have to go out and get clients. So in the meantime, I needed money because money comes from paying clients. And I was part of an XYPN advisors launcher group a group of other financial advisors that had launched their businesses around the same time as myself. And we would take turns sharing, what are you working on in your business this week? What are you working on in your business this week? And when it was my turn to present, I shared with them all my, I'm going to call it productive procrastinations that I was working on. And I think you maybe could relate to this given our conversation at the beginning before we started recording. But I was working on all the things at one time. But the thing that I was really excited about working on was setting up business processes, and even beyond that, setting up automations to have those business processes happen without input from me or any other employees, if possible. Because in addition to being really bad at selling, I was also really bad at delegating. I actually did a presentation about this earlier this week, and I explained I was super anti-team. No longer am anti-team, but at that point, I was like, how can I avoid hiring as long as possible? How can I avoid going out and selling as long as possible? And to make a long story short, other folks in my advisor launchers group were like, hey, can we hire you to help us with these really cool things that you're doing in your business? We love what you're doing. Can we have you set those up for us too? And we'll pay you. And I was like, great, sounds good to me. And that's how my business was born. And one of those original clients encouraged me to speak to the XYPN membership, do a members only webinar and explain again all the things that I was working on. I think 80 people came to that first speaking presentation. And from there, it just gained its own momentum. I didn't even really do too much marketing in the beginning. All I did was really just focus on educating advisors. Here's what I'm working on. Here are some ideas and inspiration of things that you too can work on. And if you need help, you can hire me to help you. That's great. But I also wanted to just allow people to know what was possible. And that philosophy really has stuck with me to this day. Like 8 years later, here we are, and I'm still doing this
Wow.
work. I've since stopped doing the advising because, like you, I had way too many balls in the air. My family never saw me. I was just super busy all the time, and I decided I needed to really narrow down my focus. But that original idea of wanting to educate and empower folks to know what's possible with technology and automation to enable them to have that efficiency, that part has always remained even to this day.
That's awesome. Well, let's get into the meaty conversation then. So for advisors that maybe aren't really turned on to automation yet, they want systems, they want processes. I think every advisor wants that. Like when we talk about the adrenaline program, what I hear feedback wise is that the number one or two reason people want help is because of the lack of system, the lack of processes, whether it be client service, onboarding, things like that. So to advisors that are getting started with automation, what types of tasks or processes would you say are best to automate first?
Yeah, great question. I would say even before actually automating anything, it is the processes, it is the systems that is most important. And that's not work that I'm really good at. I will freely admit there are plenty of people. I have lots of partners that do that work of actually creating the workflows, creating the processes, creating the systems of what should be happening and documenting all of that. And then once you've got all that in place, and yes, it takes time, and yes, it's not as fun and sexy as the actual automation, but it's a really integral and important step that you really can't skip if you want to make sure your automations are running properly. But once you have the what, once you know exactly the step by step of what you'd like to happen, that's where we can then take a look at those processes and say, hey, where are those opportunities for automation? For me, it's not always about automation in the sense of like 20 steps and everything one by one goes automatically from start to finish, but more so where can we interplay some efficiencies? So, for example, things like setting up a scheduling software, Calendly, Acuity, Schedule Once, those are some popular ones. And they even have built-in automation functionality. Things like somebody books a meeting, send them a confirmation that the meeting is now on their calendar. Send them reminder emails before the event actually occurs to say, hey, don't forget, we have a meeting coming up, and here's the location or here's the link to actually attend that meeting. Those, to me, and maybe to some of your listeners, are like, oh, that's obvious. But what I've learned is that not everybody even has those, what some of us would consider simple automations. They're very approachable. They're very digestible. They're not hard to set up. They don't require a big tech stack, just one piece of software. And those are the places for anybody who's just getting started, who's never touched automation at all, that I would begin first with those built-in automation tools. And then from there, there's more advanced things that we could talk about doing. But it's really just a matter of gaining those efficiencies little by little, getting those low-hanging fruits.
And what do you talk when you talk about more advanced automations? Is that when you get into Zapier?
It is, yes.
And
Zapier and things like coding, things like, for example, hey, now that meeting has been booked on your calendar. Calendly internally is sending a reminder email ahead of the meeting, but maybe there's also other things that need to happen in the background in other systems that aren't Calendly. For example, maybe you have your workflows documented in your CRM, Redtail, Wealthbox, Salesforce, and you want to launch those workflow processes, or maybe you want to assign tasks to your team members. Hey, there's some prep needed ahead of the meeting actually occurring. So create a task due 3 days before the meeting start date and assign it to this particular team member so that they know exactly what they need to do in order to get prepared. I also include in that things like forms with complex conditional logic. So, hey, if this question is answered this way, I love the look on your face.
what did you just say? I didn't even know. Bless you.
If this question is answered this way, then show or hide these subsequent questions or calculate out. I'm going to just give you a really high level example of something I built, about a year ago for a client, which is we built out a financial planning recommendations form. And the advisor or the client or the two of them together will sit down and run through the questions on this form. And based on the way they answer the questions, it recommends opportunities for the advisor and the client together to explore in future planning conversations, tax opportunities, estate opportunities. And it doesn't necessarily dive into the calculations. It's not a planning tool, but what it does is it facilitates those conversations and makes sure that, again, we don't fat finger it, metaphorically speaking, by
Yep.
forgetting to talk about something that could be a really good opportunity for the client.
Okay. And so, from a tech stack standpoint, do people need to sign up for Zapier? Is there like a subscription you pay? How's that work?
Yeah, it is a subscription. So there's a free plan. You can get started, but it's pretty limited. And I'd say most people need to at least be on the cheapest paid plan, which right now is around $20 a month. So it's not
Yeah.
prohibitively expensive by any means. Most of our clients on the plans that they're on is nowhere more than $50 a month, a give or take. So as you could see, it's
Very
a small
inexpensive.
price to pay for the amount of efficiency you're gaining. You're, again, avoiding needing to hire somebody just to do things like data entry. And then you have a world of possibilities at your fingertips, whether you yourself are interested in learning more. Zapier has some great free resources. And if you've gotten beyond that and you need to take it to the next level, then we also have we have a Zapier course that you can purchase on our website. And we also do one-on-one coaching with folks that are more technically inclined in addition to the done-for-you work that we do.
Yeah, full disclosure. First of all, we at Libertas have hired Arielle many times in the past, which is one of the reasons she's on this podcast. Second of all, one of the jokes that happens oftentimes, or not jokes, but one of the reasons people start laughing on office hours calls at Adrenaline is because we've actually built lots of processes. So we have the processes. We hired you to help create the automations. But oftentimes people will say to I'll use this as an example. You said, there's a free version of Zapier, then there's a $20 a month, and there's a $50 a month, and I'm sitting here laughing to myself because I'm like, wow, that's really cheap. I'm paying for it. I didn't know what it cost, but I'm paying for it. And the reason I don't know what it costs is because Gina at our office is handling that with you, and it's
Mhm.
back to that delegation thing. I have no idea what's going on. I'm saying, here's the process. Let's make this automated, and then you have your team do it, or in this case, you would be part of the team, right? Um, for those that don't know what Zapier is or what it does, I mean, can you give like I don't know, a 2-minute overview of what it's doing, behind the scenes and how it works?
Yeah, I like to compare Zapier to Velcro. It
Mm,
helps two systems that don't normally speak to each other, passing data back and forth, to be able to do that. Or you can also think of it like a translator of sorts. Data from, again, let's just use the same example, scheduler to CRM. Somebody books a meeting in your scheduling software. And Zapier pulls the data from your scheduler into your CRM software. And that's really in a nutshell what Zapier is doing. It's bridging the gap between two distinct separate platforms and allowing them to communicate data across each other.
Can you walk us through maybe a real life example of a Zap and that's what they're called, by the way, is Zaps,
Yes.
that you set up for a financial advisor that you feel maybe was like one of the big impact ones, one of your favorites?
Oh, that's so hard. Like you said, like pick your top three things that you're doing that are working for you. Well, it's impossible to say which ones are the most impactful. But some of the ones that I really think are probably the most impactful ones are CRM related again. Things like when a form is filled out. So we've gotten beyond scheduling. Let's kind of just walk through the hypothetical client lifecycle process. You have a new potential client who's going to meet with you for the first time. They book a meeting on your scheduler. We want to add that meeting to your calendar and your CRM. And then perhaps there's a little bit more information you need to gather from them ahead of the meeting to make sure you have an informed conversation with them. So we set up an automation that sends them a link to that longer form, gets their information, and then when they fill it out, adds that information into the CRM, creating a contact record and or a household or both, linking them together, kicking off a workflow for those next steps. Like there are just so many opportunities. It's really hard to pick one, and I'm
Yeah.
not trying to avoid your question, but there's just so many opportunities.
No, I wanted you to answer it to a certain extent, but I didn't know you were gonna and like, when you say, I don't wanna not answer your question. We were talking offline about the whole top 3, and there is no top 3 things that work. I'm so
Yeah.
glad you said that because it just goes to show how important creating processes and systems are and then automating them because there's not one thing that's going to make your life magical and all of a sudden you're going to play golf on Fridays. It's like there's so many things that you can automate, and honestly I believe you should automate anything that can be automated. You should automate it. I mean, get all that crap out of your head. Things that when you worry about at night when you're like, oh man, did I do that, did I forget this thing? Well, you don't have to worry about it because guess what, technology usually doesn't make mistakes as long as it's not it's trash in, trash out, right? But as long as it's programmed correctly, then you're good to go. Speaking of trash in, trash out, what would you say are some of the common mistakes you see advisors make when setting up their own automations?
Yeah. I mean, I'd say that for the most part, advisors typically tend to do a really good job in terms of understanding their own processes, setting up the initial automations. At least the people that work with me, oftentimes when they come to me, I'm really impressed by how well they've actually done to get to the point where they are. I'd say it's less about making mistakes typically than it is about hitting a limit in terms of what their technical expertise allows them to do. There'll be just like this one little tweak that I'll see that I'm like, oh, here's the thing that you missed. And it's not necessarily like, oh, it's a mistake, you did something wrong, but it's like, hey, you could never have known without all the years of experience that this is the thing that you were missing. And I think a lot of times it's like financial planning in that regard. It's like you could never have known that, possibly known that one little nuance of the tax code without the years of experience of actually working and planning and doing this work. So I would say if there is any mistake, like a true mistake, it's not doing the documentation before starting down the path of actually setting up the automation. Because then what ends up happening is it takes much longer than it needs to actually get to the finish line. Or you set something up and then you do get to the finish line, but ultimately realize, like, oh, I completely missed this huge part of what I was supposed to do. Now I have to go back and kind of undo all the things that I set up in order to not cause a domino effect of possible problems down the line.
That makes sense. Speaking of time, I mean, how much time should someone expect to invest when trying to DIY their own setup?
Oh gosh, again, it really just depends on how much you're setting up and what your level of technical expertise is, what other things are on your plate. I really couldn't even say. It really varies, but even for us when we're working with clients and we're setting up projects, a simple project that maybe would take me an hour to set up would probably take 4 to 5 times that for somebody to DIY. So scale that up or down depending on the scope of what somebody's trying to accomplish. Um, but then again, I will say we have clients that are very technically proficient. They're more usually coaching folks that are like, hey, again, like my prior example, I got 95% of it done. I just hit this one wall. I need help pushing it over the finish line. And on the other end of the spectrum, we have folks that really just don't care they really don't care to touch the technology if they can help it. They're like, as hands off as I can be. I would never have figured this out in a million years if I didn't have you to help me. So it it really just depends on which end of the spectrum you're on. But for the average client, I would say we probably save people about 4 to 5 times the amount of time that they would spend themselves.
I would actually add a third type of person in there, which is me, and that's the person that likes technology and I enjoy it, but I don't have the time. And it's just I look at my hourly rate. I take my income, divide it by, 52 weeks. I get rid of all the vacation time. I find an hourly rate, and that's what I'd be spending of my time on that activity. And it doesn't make any sense for me to spend that time. And not to mention, I'd like to see my kids grow up too. That's part of this too, right? At what point do you recommend advisors stop DIYing? Based on your experience, you've seen enough of this, I'm sure, and to bring a pro in like you to help.
I mean, I think you just answered the question before you even asked it. You you really just hit the nail on the head, and that's exactly what I would say. At the point where you feel like you've either hit your technical limit in terms of your expertise and your knowledge, or you've hit your time limit where there's other things you wanna do instead, that's the point where it makes sense to hire somebody else to do it for you. And there is that middle ground again of doing a hybrid approach, doing some of it yourself, and I'll always tell people like, "Hey, I think this is something that's easy enough, that's, fast enough that you could benefit from learning how to do it yourself, even if it's just so you understand very intrinsically how it works. That way, if anything does need to change or anything does go wrong in the future, you kinda have a sense of where those things might be." Um, but once you've hit the point where you're like, "Hey, this no longer interests me," or "I just don't have time for it because there's other things I wanna do," we're here to help.
Okay. And I'd like to share my favorite automation that you've helped us set
Please, I'd
up,
love to hear it.
because I do have a favorite. We do a lot with Google. We do a lot with advertising. Obviously writing our own articles, videos, things like this, right? YouTube for our clients, podcasts, and so on, screencasts. And my favorite automation, we have a lead magnet automation, which is the top 5 things to ask when searching for a financial advisor. And there's an automation you built for us there. And then there's another one we call a funnel, where on our homepage, well, on every web page, there's what most people would probably say too many links to see if we're a good fit. For those of you who are watching or listening and thinking, yeah, that's really annoying, and I can't believe people do that all the time. The reason they do it is because it works. So it might be annoying to you because it was annoying to me, but we started doing it because it works. But then when they click on that link, we have all these questions that we ask them, and they get to kind of almost like a quiz. People like filling out quizzes, but it's not a quiz; it's an assessment, right? That it tells us who they are. It tells us, where they're coming from, what the solutions they're looking for. And by the time they hit our inbox, we already know a lot about them in advance before we set up an intro call. And so that's my favorite automation, and it just shows up. So it's really, really cool. But
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm so happy to hear that.
yeah, no, for sure. Let's change gears just kind of before we wrap up. I want to talk a little bit about mindset, challenges with growth, things like that. I mean, what excites you most about the future of automation specifically in the financial services area? Because obviously there's a lot out there that we just don't know about. When I say we, I mean advisors. You know more, right, than we do. But I mean, what's out there that's really exciting you in terms of what's happening right now and what you see in the future?
I think that a lot of times I'm surprised and not surprised in a bad way, but like pleasantly surprised when people will approach me and tell me, "Hey, I heard about this new tool. Have you heard of it?" And I'm like, "No, I can't be everywhere at once." So I love when people approach me with new and novel things that are on the market because then it allows me to dive a little deeper and to learn more about something that I hadn't even heard about yet. I'd say in a general sense, the thing that really excites me is AI. It also scares me a little bit because I can see where there's some downsides to it. But I think ultimately, in the long run, AI is going to be beneficial in terms of giving us more efficiency and adding more ability to focus again back on that human side of things. Right now, I'd say AI note takers are all the rage. I mean, probably at this point, most of us are either using an AI note taker or know many people who have been in a meeting where there's been at least one, if not 20 AI note takers. And I think that that is a huge advancement for that idea of accuracy, making sure that we're not missing something, but we're still able to engage in the conversation with our clients, knowing that in the background, those notes are being captured. So if there is a specific data point we need to go back and reference, we'll have access to it. But I think that beyond note takers, AI in general is really closing the gap between allowing more people who have less technology interest or less technology expertise to be able to do more and be more powerful in terms of the things that they can set up themselves. And maybe that puts me in less of a job in a certain sense. But I think at the end of the day, it really just boils down to what you said. The work that I'm doing, and I've always said this, is not necessarily rocket science. 85 to 90% of the things that I do, anybody can do them with enough time invested, with enough practice, with enough repetition. It's that time savings, and it's that, hey, I know how to do this faster because I've been doing it for so long, that really makes a difference. But there are always going to be people that don't need to hire me or don't want to hire me, or any automation expert for that matter. And that's why I think AI is really so important, is because it allows more people to self-service and to be able to achieve more on their own without needing to hire me or somebody like me, which is great. It sounds counterintuitive, but I actually think that's fabulous.
Well, I think the other thing is idea generation, right? Somebody might hire you and say that they might think what they're going to get out of it is, I have these 5 processes or these 5 systems, and I want Arielle's help in creating automations and making it so I don't have to think anymore. And then they come in and you create that for them in a matter, a very short period of time. You install it for them, and then you go, "Hey, have you thought about this? What about this?" And the next thing you're going, "Oh, wow, yeah, I didn't know we could do that," or here's some best practices. So I think that there's so much out there, or as the saying goes, you don't know what you don't know. Um, and as far as AI goes, I mean, we talked earlier about delegation, and then how automation is like delegation, but to, software technology instead of people. And I think that that's so important, to have we teach advisors how to build a top-notch elite onboarding process from the second we get that funnel email, right? With all the answers to the questions that you built for us, to through their intro call, through discovery, through education, a financial planning meeting, to hiring us. And our conversion ratio is north of 85%. So once you have that in place, then you start looking at things like automation, like what you're doing, ChatGPT, Claude, and then the efficiencies become insane. It's like you're saving so much time, life's easier, and then you don't have to worry so much about, the money side of things, or, what am I going to do during this market correction? I'm not going to pay my bills. I think that a lot of us worry about stuff like that. So um, a lot of us have great businesses that we've built and we're doing pretty well, but we just need to get unstuck, and we need to get out of that rut of, how do I get to the next level? And so many of those things are, again, back to that, I don't know what I don't know. So I think a lot of what you bring to the table is working with hundreds of financial advisors over the last, would you say, 8 years?
Yeah.
Um, and seeing what they've done, and then having all this library of process and system ideas. I think that's huge. What about misconceptions, though? What would you say, barriers to entry, whatever you want to call it? What would you say the biggest misconceptions that advisors have about automation when they come to you?
I'd say it's two things, and they're somewhat opposite of each other in a way. I'd say on the one hand, some people have the misconception that it's going to be super easy to set everything up, and they're not going to have to do any kind of thinking in the process of actually building it out. And unfortunately, that's not true, because I'm not a mind reader yet. We haven't developed that
Yeah.
technology yet. But there is, as we were discussing earlier, some initial work that needs to be done in terms of making sure your processes are ironed out, and making sure that things are documented fully and clearly, how you want them to flow step by step. So I'd say that's misconception number one. There is definitely some initial work needed. And on the back end, once things are set up, there's time needed for testing the systems and making sure that there aren't bugs. And inevitably, there will be bugs. I'm just going to throw that out there right now. But once we get it all working seamlessly, then things are usually pretty good, pretty able to self-maintain. But that initial period, there is some work required. And then I'd say on the other end of the spectrum, A lot of advisors think like, oh, automation can't really help me do that much. Like, there's no point in actually automating anything because it's not going to save me enough time to be worthwhile. It's not going to even make a difference. So, totally the opposite side of things. And I would say, even if, again, if even if you spend $20 on the cheapest paid Zapier plan, and even if you set up two automations that somebody books a meeting, it creates a contact in your CRM, and somebody fills out a form and it updates that contact with additional information that you've gathered. Those two automations alone are probably saving at least 15 minutes per contact that you're entering. Scale that up by how many new leads you're talking to, how many clients you're onboarding, and you can already start to see that just two automations that are fairly cheap to run on a monthly basis are saving you hours potentially of time every week. And so I would say that's definitely a misconception. That's less common than the other side of things. Usually people are more optimistic in terms of
That's
the
good.
initial investment of time, but there are people that are on the other side that think like, oh, it's not even worth it. And I would say it usually is worth it, but only you can decide that for yourself.
I think it's a no-brainer. I don't think that I think anybody that doesn't wanna save time is happy with the time they're spending, I guess. I don't know. I would think that, even if it's 15 minutes, I mean, like you said, multiply that over how many occurrences, everything that you automate, you free up time to do something else, whether that's becoming more productive and more successful or spending time with your family, spending time doing something you enjoy. I mean, that's, work-life balance, things like that. I think we all could use a little bit more of that, especially as workaholics.
Yeah, I
What's
do.
up
I agree.
What's up next, for Sphynx? You mentioned you did a call a week ago. Is that something that our subscribers can check out? Is that something that's out there on the web somewhere?
It actually wasn't a call, it was an in-person speaking
Oh,
engagement.
okay.
So it was for SCORE, the Service Corps of Retired Executives, which is a free organization that does mentorship for entrepreneurs and business owners considering getting into business, or even folks that have been in business for any number of years and want to learn efficiencies and scaling. And so really I was just talking about it was an inspirational speech talking about how my journey through my various career changes has impacted me and the lessons that I've learned along the way. So unfortunately, it's not available on the web, but there are plenty of other places where I've talked about that journey at various lengths over the years. Um,
Where's the best place to find those kinds of things for people who wanna check it out and maybe get their feet wet?
Great question. I would say probably just Google my name or Google Sphynx, and it should hopefully come up. And if anybody wants to see something specific, I mean, I'm always happy to field questions or inquiries and direct you to the right resource. In terms of what's next for us, we've been working on this for years, and hopefully this is the year that we're finally going to launch it, what we're calling our Automation Academy.
Hmm.
And that's going to be more of a hybrid approach of group coaching, live sessions, as well as pre recorded activities and homework that folks can do. This is really, especially in its initial iteration, geared towards the folks that are just launching and are just starting out in the industry, or maybe they're changing careers, or maybe they're making a transition to working for a broker dealer or an umbrella RIA to launching their own firm, getting them basically the most important things that they need to set up a good foundation, technology wise, automation wise, so that they're not over engineering the process before they've even had a chance to figure out what their process is, but also allowing them to have some of those low hanging fruit efficiencies that are going to transcend their processes and what their client experience looks like. So that's hopefully going to be launching at some point later this year. In the interim, we've launched like a mini version of that, and we're calling it our Quick Start projects. These are 8 different, like, best practice, low hanging fruit form and Zap automations that we've created, and they're all $1,000 or less, and they're just things that really anybody can benefit from, in terms of launching efficiencies in their firm.
Awesome, that's fun. I love the academy approach, where people who don't wanna fork over a ton of money into the consulting, they're getting started and they're, looking to kinda start the right way, right? Automate everything to begin with, which talking about it's almost like putting money into your 401(k) and maxing it out as early as possible. You get used to it early and, man, your life's a whole lot easier later on down the road. We'll be linking your website, all your social media profiles to the show notes, so If you'd like to get a hold of Arielle, you can find her at sphinxautomation.com. You can find her on Instagram at Sphynx Automation, Twitter, LinkedIn, or I guess it's X now, LinkedIn, Facebook. For anybody who's listening, watching, and you'd like to dive deeper into your work, feel free to get a hold of her there. And as I always say, there's thousands and thousands of podcasts out there, and you chose to give ours a listen today. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for tuning in to the Advisors Fuel podcast. For more articles, videos, and resources, or to schedule an intro call, visit adrenalineadvisor.com. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for financial or legal advice. Always talk to your compliance department before implementing any of the ideas shared in this episode.